our women's health podcast,
where we'll be telling you the facts and debunking the myths.
We'll be keeping it chatty and casual, and you can follow us on Instagram at Between Two Ovaries. Welcome to Between Two Ovaries, our women's health podcast, and today we are going to be talking about how do I get pregnant, the ins and outs.
So we wanted to talk about this because you go through school, you have sex education hopefully, and it's like, don't get pregnant, whatever you do, don't. And then I feel like you get to your mid-20s, people start telling you, oh, I'm having a baby, and you're like, are we happy about this, are we not? And like, then you decide you want a baby, and it's like, well, what do you do? So I think we need to figure out what we do and what we don't do. Yeah.
I think that's totally true, and I think that you kind of are worried that you're going to get pregnant the first time you have sex, and then you use contraception for a lot of years of your life, and it might not even be your mid-20s, it might be like your mid-30s that you decide to have a baby. But then when you decide to have one, you're like, what happens next? And I think the best thing is to have sex. Unprotected intercourse is the best way to get pregnant. But actually, I feel like that's not what people do. They just jump straight into, oh my gosh, I need to know where my cycle is. I need to know what to do. I need to know how to kind of get pregnant as fast as possible. And I think that's where people potentially go wrong, because on the whole, most people will get pregnant within a year of trying to get pregnant. So if you're having regular unprotected intercourse 2 to 3 times a week, you will get pregnant, kind of 80 to 85% of people in that first year. So I think the overall arching of this is that you don't need to do anything special. You don't need to take anything special. You don't need to buy anything. You don't need to follow anybody or do any different random things. You just need to have unprotected intercourse is the way to get pregnant.
Yeah.
But
well, I was going to say, shall we kind of go back to the basics a little bit, because it is really reassuring that most people will get pregnant after a year of having regular sex, but it does induce anxiety for people when they don't know what's going on with their cycle, and like Lorna said, you get told how not to get pregnant, and then all of a sudden you want to start.
Can you just do the opposite?
Start, like, just go through what actually happens in the endometrial cycle and in the sperm, and we'll see.
I think it's really important.
To get pregnant.
And I think, as you said, you have sex education at school, but I'm not entirely sure how much sex education different people get. And do you remember what happens in
I think
a
lot of
biology
people don't
lesson?
particularly understand what happens in their menstrual cycle throughout it.
Yeah. So we'll have a quick go through what happens in your cycle. So when you start your period on day 1 of your cycle, well, that is what we call day 1 of your cycle, when you start bleeding. And then you go into the proliferative stage of the cycle. So that first part of your cycle is all to do with estrogen. So you've got a few hormones that are involved in your endometrial cycle. One of them is estrogen, and that kind of the first part of your cycle. So you've shed off the top layer of the endometrium. So the endometrium is that lining inside your womb that you shed on a monthly basis. You shed that off with your period, and then the estrogen starts to increase, and then this lining of the womb just gets thicker and thicker, and it's basically ready for you to have an implantation, so ready for you to welcome an embryo if that's what you wanted. And that's what we do kind of on a monthly basis, and there's not many things that do that. So humans do that, upper order primates do that, and some random
There's
other
a couple mice.
like
the elephant shrew.
The elephant shrew does
Some
that.
random little rodent.
Not the normal field mouse though.
No, not a field mouse.
Yeah.
But on
It's
the
quite
whole,
special,
it's
yeah.
very special to have a menstrual cycle and to bleed. Special, debilitating, annoying.
All of these issues.
But it makes us kind of very different to other kind of mammals. So in that estrogen stage of the cycle, the endometrium thickens, so it's ready for an implantation. And then when you get towards the end of that phase, you will have ovulation. So you'll have a different hormone which will produce, it will speak to your ovaries and kind of make you ovulate one of the eggs into out of your ovary into your fallopian tube, but there is not direct access. They're not adjoined to each other. It is wafted into the fallopian tube. That's the word that they use, wafted. Yeah, into the fallopian tube. And then that hormone just has a very quick rise and fall, so it just kind of causes that to happen. And then where you've ovulated from produces a cyst, which is a normal cyst everybody gets after ovulation. So that's when people have scans sometimes and they're like, oh, I've got a cyst on my ovary, and you're like, it'll come and go. It's physiological, as they say, at different times of your cycle. And then that cyst will produce the progesterone that will help the second part of the cycle. So the progesterone is needed to make all the secretory changes in the endometrium, that lining of your womb, so that it's ready for that embryo to kind of embed in. And if it does embed in, then the progesterone will carry on to be produced by that cyst that's left. And then lots of other different hormones get produced as well, so that we can kind of keep the embryo and carry on for a pregnancy. Now, if you weren't wanting to get pregnant and if it was just a normal cycle, you're not on any hormonal contraceptives, you will have the progesterone in the second part of your cycle, and you'll have something that's called a luteal phase, the second part of your cycle. It's called different things. I think this what makes it quite confusing as well.
Yeah, because you've got, like, without getting too technical, you've got the endometrial cycle and the ovulatory, the ovarian cycle, and they have different words for each, but they're both describing the same time of the month. So after ovulation, before your period.
Yeah.
Secretory or luteal phase.
Yeah.
But that's what they refer to. Yeah.
I think when people have different apps, it makes it quite confusing.
Yeah, which one are you looking at? Yeah.
But basically the second part of your cycle can have different names, but it's always doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Ruled by progesterone, and then if there is no implantation, then you go on again into having a period. So that is the cycle in a whole. So you would, when you've ovulated, you've got that time when you can get pregnant, and then after fertilization, then if there is implantation, you could do a pregnancy test 2 weeks after you've had your ovulation.
Not
so
instantly.
Not instantly. It gets very confusing. And I do think like TV programs and stuff make it really
They make it
confusing.
so wrong,
They do. Well, they make it seem like you have sex once, you do a test the next day, and then you have a baby next week. It doesn't happen like that in real life. No. Like, it's a lot more difficult in real life.
And also the pregnancy tests that say like 1 to 2 weeks and stuff, people get really confused with that, because it's to do with kind of when you had your ovulation, and then they're like, I don't know how pregnant I am because I don't know where it's counted from. So we count a pregnancy from the first day of your period,
of your last
period.
Oh.
So from 4 weeks.
Yeah.
So the day you miss your first period, you're actually 4 weeks pregnant.
So if someone says they're 16 weeks, it's that 15 weeks of pregnancy.
Okay. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So actually, for 2 weeks of your pregnancy, you weren't even pregnant. You hadn't ovulated.
Yeah.
In fact, for 4 weeks of your pregnancy, really, you weren't actually pregnant. You were ovulating after 2 weeks, and then fertilization and implantation were happening in the second 2 weeks.
Interesting.
It's very confusing, and especially if people have been on the pill and not been having periods for an extended amount of the time. They don't know how long
when they might have
when
it.
their cycle is. They might not have had a tracker app because they've just not been having periods.
I think a lot of people are like that with regards to they don't know when the last period was, so they're not sure how pregnant they are, which is fine, because even if you have an IVF pregnancy, when you come to your dating scan, they're like, we know that you had your embryo implanted then, but actually you're 2 days out, which is like crazy in a sense, but they always date it at your dating scan, how far you on with the pregnancy.
Yeah, so even if you have irregular periods, you'll still know your due date from your dating scan if you get pregnant. We should also probably say that as well, like the endometrial cycle, the menstrual cycle, is not just the typical 28 days as all of the textbooks and things predict them to be or tell us that they should be. So it's really normal to have a varied length of menstrual cycle. So you might have a period every 28 days, and then 32 days is the next cycle, and then 35 days, even that is normal. And you don't always ovulate 14 days before your period, which we're taught in school as well, I think. That also varies, so it can be quite difficult to try and predict when you ovulate, if that's what you want to do, to try and either get pregnant or avoid getting pregnant, which we will talk about as well. We'll talk about some ovulation tests.
I think it is kind of like knowing kind of that cycles are normal. And I think we see a lot of people that are like, oh, my cycles are really irregular, or I'm very worried because I'm 2 days late, or I'm worried because I've had a period at the wrong time. And you're like, do you know what, go with it. Unless you're having periods all over the time and they're really kind of affecting what you do, as in kind of really heavy periods or really painful periods, then actually it doesn't matter if your periods are 25 days, 30 days, 28 days, 32 days. Like,
it's not something to worry about at that point.
No. And I think that message is quite a strong message, because we do see people quite a lot in our emergency room that are kind of worried about having a second period in a month, or worried about not having a period, and actually, as long as you're having periods ish monthly, it doesn't matter if they're not close to the day. And then so we've got that first part, we've got the second part of the cycle, and that surge of the hormone in the middle that triggers the ovulation. So that's kind of the menstrual cycle, I think, in a whole. So
and I guess on the flip side, we have how is sperm produced, and it's a hell of a lot easier than an egg is produced. So women go through this whole laborious endometrial cycle and ovulatory cycle every month, but men, they just produce sperm and they get refreshed every 3 months. So if you've had a particularly unhealthy month and you've drank every night and you've been smoking and you've been not exercising very much, Elle will be forgiven after 3 months, because you'll have a whole new batch of sperm, which will not have carried the sins of your previous behaviours. So men do have a little bit easier in some ways when it comes to fertility, because they can change their lifestyle, and that can have a positive impact on their sperm count and the sperm parameters after 3 months. Yeah,
I think it's really difficult when people come through for fertility treatment, if that is the line that people go down, because you're born with the eggs that you have, and they just get older as you get older. And there is evidence that fertility declines for men when they're older, but not the same degree at all. And also they do have this like new lease of life, in a sense of they make new sperms every 3 months, they're regenerated, whereas women just don't have that ability to do that. So that is kind of a stark difference between men and women.
But I guess that being said, you can make lifestyle changes as a woman that can improve your fertility.
Oh my gosh,
improve your egg quality, I guess, is that the right word? Even though you're born with all of your eggs,
so what
you can
sort
still
of
improve.
lifestyle changes would these be?
So they're all the really boring things, like don't drink alcohol or drink less alcohol, don't smoke, do more exercise, lose weight. Anything else, Nick?
No, I think it's like just being the best person you can be. If you're not somebody who's regularly been running marathons, then taking up marathon training shouldn't be something that you should take up if you want to get pregnant. But on the flip side of that, doing gentle, regular exercise is a really good lifestyle.
Are these factors that are considered in, like, with IVF and fertility clinics?
When people come through for treatment to qualify on the NHS, your BMI's got to be less than 30, and you've got to be a non-smoker. So that is a factor to be considered when people are thinking about fertility down the line. But as we've said, most people will just get pregnant by having unprotected intercourse. And I think that's the overwhelming kind of message that we want to send. And you don't need to have lots of add-ons. And being the healthiest version of you is the best thing you can be for everything.
It's good for all parts of life, isn't it?
It's not just for fertility, it's like, it is genuinely for everything. And doing exercise and eating well, it isn't just good for your menstrual cycle, it's good for, you know, your cardiovascular health, so your heart health and your brain health and your bone health. There's so many good things for it. So
and I guess for this episode we really wanted to focus on the normal things in getting pregnant. So we will have another episode another time looking at conditions that can make it less likely for you to get pregnant. We could do one on PCOS, for example. So we'll put more information about that later. But yeah, we wanted to cover the basics of like how to actually get pregnant.
The birds and the bees.
So we've kept saying just have regular and protected sex, but there is kind of better and worse times, not worse times.
There's certain times of the month where you're fertile, aren't there, and not fertile.
Well, that's why people have all the apps to track it, isn't there? But then I think people do it in different ways, because some people do the ovulation tests, and you guys mentioned BBT?
Yeah.
I think it gets, so there are essentially the days leading up to and the day of ovulation are the days that you're fertile.
Yeah.
Because once your egg, you release one egg a month, and once that egg has been released, it tends to sort of not be able to be fertilised after 12 to 24 hours.
Yeah.
Is that about
so
right?
it only lasts a
It doesn't
very
last
short
very long.
amount of time.
Yeah.
So when people get pregnant mistakenly, you're just kind of like, oh my gosh, there was only 12 to 24 hours.
That tiny
And it's
little
still
window of
managed.
time, yeah.
Still managed.
Whereas sperm can live in the female genital tract for up to, I think it's 5 to
Yeah.
7 days.
Yeah,
but yeah.
So you get pregnant then if you've had sex before you've
Yeah.
ovulated because the
Yeah.
sperm and then
Yeah.
okay, because I very
Yeah.
much thought it was just like they were just chilling, waiting, seeing what
Yeah.
happened.
No.
It's like the best chances are the day before and the day of ovulation.
Okay.
But the
As soon
fertility
as-
acts will tell you have sex
yeah.
5 days leading up to.
As soon
Yeah.
as you've gone after that, though, it's
There's not much
There's
point.
no way
There's
you
no
can't
point.
really.
Missed the
Okay.
boat, but
Yeah.
just sail past.
yeah.
Quite a few people do at-home fertility tests
Yes.
to see if they're fertile.
Yeah.
Is this like a bad thing or?
I think they can be helpful. So I think you need a bit of a science degree to be able to do these fertility tests.
Yeah.
Well, if we talk
Interpret
about the ovulation tracking first,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yeah.
There's lots of different ovulation tests you can do at home. So it comes back to what Nick was saying before about when you ovulate, just before you ovulate, you release a big surge of the hormone called LH, and then these tests will pick up LH in your urine. So it's like doing a pregnancy test, but you're not looking for a pregnancy hormone. You're looking for LH. So there's various different types of them, but essentially what they do is after you've had your period, you'll start doing them once or twice a day, and you're looking to see if on these
Not
two
from
little
your
lines,
period, though, because that would be well too long.
from like when, maybe
So
5
maybe from
days leading
day-
up to ovulation.
Yeah, so if you have a 28-day cycle, which we've said that people
probably
can have
don't.
cycles wherever and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter, if you had a 28-day cycle, this is what the textbooks say, so you can extrapolate slightly from this. If you had a 28-day cycle, then you're going to ovulate-ish around day 14, so you would start testing-ish around day 10. If you had a much shorter cycle, so if your cycle was 25 days, then you need to be testing earlier. But you don't need to be testing every day.
No.
But when you should be testing more than once a day.
Well, it
So
depends
does
what
it-
you do. So there's lots
Okay.
of different types of ovulation tests. There's clear blue, which is once a day.
Okay.
And I think
I think
clear
that's the
blue
most
is
popular
very
one.
common.
Yeah.
Yeah. That looks at LH and also estrogen.
Yeah,
It
so
looks
it
at two
gives
hormones.
you, it's looking for like a peak fertility, not just, it's not just looking at LH, but a lot of people
Yeah.
don't get that kind of flashing face. They either have the peak from the LH or the nothing.
Yeah.
So I
And then
think,
you do get people who have either an LH peak, like it's really quick, it comes and goes in 12 hours.
Yeah.
And you get some people who have a gradual rise and a gradual drop. So
Okay.
some tests recommend doing it twice a day when you think you're going to ovulate, because if you have that really short window, if you're
You want to
a quick
catch it.
peak person, then you might miss your LH peak on the test. But it honestly gets so confusing. Like even as a
Yeah.
obs and gynae reg, I have lots of friends who are going through like trying to get pregnant and like go through IVF and stuff, and you need a lot of a certain level of education to even be able to actually interpret your own ovulation tests.
yeah, so
at home,
I think
it can
that
get
the
a bit
ones,
much.
so getting like a pregnancy test that is very cheap, I nearly named places then, but it doesn't really matter where you get it from. But if getting a pregnancy test from anywhere, no matter the price of it, is picking up a HCG hormone and it's either there or
Yeah.
it's not. You're
Yeah.
either pregnant or you're not pregnant.
Yeah.
Getting false positive pregnancy tests
It
is
doesn't
really
really
rare
happen.
to happen.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it just doesn't
Okay.
happen. LH tests, bit different.
Yeah.
So the cheaper tests, when you do a test, there are 2 lines. There's always 2 lines, but you're looking for your LH line to be darker than the control line. Well, they're just 2 blue lines.
Oh, so
Yeah.
it's not like because I was
No.
thinking lateral flows like we did in COVID, where
No.
you've got one and then
Yeah.
you have two.
That's
The other
more
one
like a
comes up.
pregnancy
Oh, so that
Yeah.
can be quite subjective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're somebody who is like getting about
Antsy
this
about it,
kind
yeah.
of situation,
If it comes
and you're
up
like,
and
is
says-
it darker? Are you
Yeah.
do you think it's
Is the
dark?
lighting looking at it different?
Yeah. So
And like also, have you drank a glass of water like
Yeah.
an hour before?
Yeah.
Like,
I
different
just think that
dilutions.
if you're going to track your ovulation, if you've got it in your head that that's what you want to do for a few months, I would just pay a bit more money and get a kit that you either know if the answer is yes or no. Getting the cheaper ones, I think, are just, people think that they're ovulating and they're not. And we talked about the clear blue kits before. it will basically just tell you yes or no straight away.
Yeah.
And I think
Which is
doing it
easier.
once a day makes it like less stressful. You're not thinking about, oh, when am I going to do it? How am I going to remember not to have water for 2 hours before I do it?
Yeah.
I think just doing it once a day when you wake up and knowing the answer, I think is
And it also
easier.
does come back to, like you said, some people might find this useful, but it's not perfect.
No.
And if you want to get pregnant, you just need to be having sex. Not
Yeah.
every day,
No.
like every other day, every 2 to 3
Don't put
days.
too much pressure on it.
Around the time of your cycle where you think you might be ovulating. I wouldn't necessarily rely just on this to have sex that one day a month.
No.
Because it's not that perfect.
No.
And you might not be interpreting it properly. And also you might not have enough money to spend lots of money on these things.
Yeah,
so
they are quite expensive.
it is free
these
to have
kind of
sex.
kits. Yeah.
Just have lots of sex instead.
Is fertility testing something that's done in clinics and hospital as well, or is it all at home?
No, so yes, definitely it happens in clinics in hospital if people need to be referred and are coming to an IVF clinic or that kind of thing. But people have and are more doing tests at home, which I'm not a massive advocate of. So we'll try and tell you why they're not a good idea.
I think we should also just like clarify between, so they were ovulation tests,
Yeah.
LH testing, and then fertility testing is
Yeah,
a different
bit
thing.
different.
And you can do, so LH testing for ovulation people will do at home.
Yeah,
Um,
happy with that.
yeah,
Don't have a
go
problem.
for it.
But
Kind of
fertility
think that
tests-
it can be a bit stress inducing
Yeah.
and probably not necessary for a
Yeah.
lot of people,
Yeah.
but happy for you to do it. The
It's
answers
normal.
are pretty like
Yeah.
yes, no.
But
But
could cause
fertility
more
tests are
anxiety.
like, people can actually, so you know, if you've been trying for a long time and you haven't got pregnant, you go to a clinic and you see Nick, and Nick does some fertility tests for you, and she can interpret the results
Yeah.
and tell you what they mean.
Because I've done a lot of training to get to that point.
Yeah, a lot,
Like, it's a
a few
thing.
degrees along the way.
Yeah.
But then you can also buy fertility tests to do at home.
Yeah.
For you to read
Which-
yourself.
You don't have someone to
With
help
no
you
training.
If you don't know how to read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds a little bit difficult.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
scary, isn't it? And like you must see a lot of people who've done that, maybe.
Yeah,
and then come into the
I
clinic.
suppose I don't really see them in clinic as much, but I see them in, like people that are friends or people that I've given a lecture to and then will come and see you afterwards. Or like, not so much through clinic, more people that have kind of just done it off their own back because they're like, oh, I think I'll do this. And, you've talked about it before about like targeted ads. And if you've suddenly been like, do you think I should have a baby? It'll pop up
It
on your
starts
phone
listening,
like,
yeah.
maybe have an AMH. And you're like, oh,
What is
they're
this?
saying I need one. I should have one.
Yeah.
But I think...
Yeah, see, now we've been talking about babies and pregnancy.
It's
You guys
gonna be
are going to
on
get
our
these
phones
adverts
all
all
the
over your
time.
Instagram.
you totally will.
Oh no.
I think it goes back to... We will finish up on the AMH thing, but I think going back to the ovulation tracking just for a little bit further, it's none of it's perfect because with regards to when people are putting their apps in their periods and stuff in a diary, well, it'll tell you what day that you're ovulating on for somebody who has a 28-day cycle a lot of the time.
And not
So it
everyone
won't
has a
fit at
28-day
all.
cycle.
So you can keep recording what you're doing, but it doesn't change. It doesn't make anything different. So yeah, I think people need to be mindful about their cycle and how it works.
Yeah.
With regards to tracking ovulation, you don't just have to use an LH kit and a urine test. There's other things that you can do. You talked about, you mentioned the basal body temperature. That's one of the things that you can do. And people actually, if or when you're trying to get pregnant, when you come off contraception, you kind of become more in tune with your body. And there's loads of things that people track. So basal body temperature is one of them. Sometimes people track the LH in the urine. You can track cervical mucus because that completely changes throughout your cycle. And people, I think, get really freaked out because they're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't track cervical mucus. But actually, you would know where you're up to in your cycle.
You just notice that. Like people notice discharge change over the cycle.
Yeah.
You don't have to actually...
Normal discharge, because discharge is
Is
normal.
normal.
And
And we should probably explain what basal body temperature
Yeah, go on.
checking is. So essentially it's checking your temperature first thing in the morning, before you've had anything to eat or drink, before you've got around and moved and
not
warmed your
after
body
you
up.
Is this just general body temperature?
Yeah, your body temperature.
I've never heard of this.
Yeah, so it's just checking your body temperature. So how you would check your temperature with like a thermometer at home, when you're a kid and your mum checks your temperature. Once a day, in the morning, before you've had a coffee, before you've moved around a lot, and you record it. And after you ovulate, your body temperature will increase slightly. So it's by like 0.2 degrees Celsius. It's something really small.
Tiny, yeah.
But if you track it, and you plot it, you'll see that your temperature will be, say, 36 degrees-ish before ovulation, and then afterwards it'll be consistently 36.2 or 3 or something like that.
Oh, so it stays high once you've ovulated.
It stays higher after you've ovulated. But again, I think that is kind of difficult to interpret as well. And you might have a cold.
Agree. I think as well,
I've not put the heating on.
Yeah, I think
if the thermometer's dodgy.
There's loads of things.
Yeah.
I do think being in tune with your body, and as I know we've said, just have regular unprotected intercourse, but I'm just like, when you're off contraception and being in tune with your own body, like there's lots of people that I see, patients that come through, and I'll say, have you tracked your ovulation? Because they're in a fertility clinic, not because I think people should do that. And they'll say, no, but I know that I've ovulated because I know from lots of different, like I can feel that I've ovulated, my cervical mucus changes, there's just loads of things. So I just kind of think you could throw a lot of money at these situations, and I think a lot of the time they're not going to help.
Yeah.
So
I think that comes quite nicely as well onto anxiety around getting pregnant and how you might buy into these kind of like fads,
ads.
like adverts, things that tell you, like, if you drink this special tea, you'll get pregnant next month.
TikTok and Instagram are completely full of
exactly
everywhere.
You might end up being someone that gets very anxious about it and then makes himself feel better by spending money on these things that then don't work, and you can really get into a vicious cycle of like wasting your money essentially, because there's quite a few things that I've seen, and I guess you guys have probably seen as well, when you've been doing some research for myths about fertility.
There's so many myths out there.
I think big companies sometimes play on people's anxieties to make money with it, and a lot of the things are completely unnecessary.
I think as well, like, that ties in with now, like, people are waiting that little bit longer. Like I said mid-20s at the start, but like Nick said, people are waiting until their 30s, sometimes 40s to think about having a baby. And like, there's so many companies that play on like, oh well, you're getting older, so better get those eggs frozen and things like that. And maybe that brings us into the myths of like, age obviously does affect your fertility.
It really does.
Yeah. Is that the only thing? Like,
But also with the whole really dramatic fertility cliff.
Yeah, are we off the edge?
You actually are not going to get pregnant after this age, and after 35, you've missed your shot. I think it's quite...
Yeah, not true.
Made more dramatic.
Definitely not true. But also, because you were like mid-20s, mid-30s, sometimes into 40s. And actually, I do see people quite regularly who were unaware that at the age of 41, 42, their fertility will have massively declined. And I feel like it's like... It is a general awareness of the situation. Your fertility starts to decline with age. After 37, it really starts to decline. And then after 40, and between 40 and 42, the rates of fertility have very much declined. And the eggs that you have remaining, so the eggs that you ovulate, have got a much, much higher chance of not having the correct number of chromosomes. So any egg, any potential embryo, any potential pregnancy has a much higher chance of being a miscarriage, or unfortunately kind of not implanting, or having a baby that's got a chromosomal problem, so a trisomy, too many chromosomes, or a problem, because you're left with obviously we said you're born with your eggs, and your eggs have aged with you, and you've left with the ones that just aren't that great.
On the male side as well, I think a lot of people think it's just for females, need to be a certain age, but the sperm count and quality does decrease with age.
It does
as well,
decline with age, but it's a bit later. So for women, it's, like Nick was saying, after 37, it really does decline quite rapidly. But for men, it's later, more like 40s, 50s. Obviously, you'll hear about like Hugh Hefner having babies at 70, and these things do happen. And there isn't as much of a fertility cliff that you can drop off when you're a man, I guess.
I like
a bit more of a gradual decline. But it is hard, isn't it? Because, you don't want to scaremonger people into like saying, your fertility will decline at 35, Eleanor, so you need to think about when you want to have your babies.
Get on with it.
But equally, you want people to be aware of that, because you do get the person who like blunders along and then gets to 40 and thinks like, well, why can't I get pregnant? I thought I was told I could. So
I think something as well that a lot of especially younger people worry about is whether being on contraception is going to affect their fertility in the future. And they're like, oh, I don't want to be on a hormonal contraception pill because if I don't have periods for this amount of time, I'll never get them back and I'll never be able to have a baby.
Yes, that's a no. That's a definite no.
But I've
So
definitely heard
contraception
people
doesn't.
thinking that.
Oh, yeah.
And
It doesn't. It does not affect your future fertility. It affects your fertility while you're on it, as in you will hopefully not get pregnant if you're
fingers
taking it
crossed.
correctly.
Yeah.
Which is what we want to have.
Which is the point of it for a lot of people, but it doesn't. No contraceptive will affect your long-term fertility if it's used correctly and has.
Some of them it will take longer for your fertility to return. So, for example, the depot, which is an injection sometimes people use for contraceptive, which a lot of the times, most times, will completely stop your periods. Because it's an injection that you take every 12 weeks, there is a crossover, so the hormone is massive but will stay high, and then you'll have another one and it will stay high. So it's got to all get out of
a solid level.
It's not like, well, you can imagine 12 weeks, oh my gosh, your fertility is back. It's not going to happen.
That wouldn't be
so,
great.
yeah, because you go like, oh God, I need the appointment today. So it's something like that, your fertility can take longer to come back.
So with like coming off the pill, obviously it's not going to be
It's
the
like
day you come off the pill,
3 to 6
you're going to
months
get
for the
pregnant.
pill. Yeah. But
Some
you can.
people, they'll literally
Yeah.
get pregnant the day after they've come off the pill.
Yeah. So don't count on that.
It will, like, each contraception is slightly different, isn't
Yeah.
it? But like the pill, generally 3 to 6 months, your full fertility should be back to normal. The coil is one that you can whip out and get pregnant next week.
Yeah. I feel also it's not just your fertility after coming off something that like a hormonal contraception. I feel your body does adjust in all different ways to get back.
Definitely.
Yeah,
back
and
to
like you were
normal.
saying before, I think if you start to then not have any hormones, any exogenous extra hormones, your body's just doing its normal hormonal cycle. You'll start to notice things like, oh, my cycle's 34 days long, and I have this kind of discharge on the second part of my cycle.
Yeah.
You become more like in tune.
Aware with it,
yeah.
But this whole, I don't want to be on hormones because it will affect my fertility, and I need to be clean living, so therefore not on hormones. That if you would want to be on hormones for contraceptive or for any other reason that you're potentially on hormones for, then you should be on hormones. Like a
It's
hormonal
not
treatment,
gonna-
it's not going to affect.
Yeah.
I think that just flipping back to what you said about the at-home fertility test, because I feel like we brushed over because we hadn't finished on the LH stuff.
Oh yeah.
We do need to quickly mention about these because they are problematic. So if you're doing an at-home fertility test, and that could be something whereby you're sending your urine off to a company, or you're sending a pinprick of blood to a company, or you're visiting someone like the people that did like COVID tests and stuff.
Yeah,
They're
like
now
private
offering
health
like fertility screens and stuff. But you've got to remember that they're just going to give you results like, there you go, Lorna.
Have a read of that, Lara.
There's your results.
You've
and you'll be
passed your
like,
driving test.
yeah.
That's not
failed.
like pass fail. Yeah, that happened too. Sorry, Mum.
Sorry.
There's only one time. It's fine.
Second time
to
passes
home.
better.
But it's that whole, you're going to get a number and then you'll get the normal
The range
numbers
or something,
in
yeah.
brackets, and then that's it.
Oh.
So difficult to interpret.
So what are you
if
gonna
you've
do?
got no
Walk out the door
idea.
and figure it out
Yeah.
yourself.
So remember that whole, we discussed that we've had a bit of training, like Alison did go to med school.
Just a
I went to
little
med
bit of
school.
training.
We've done like subspecialities to kind of try and, be informed about what we do and make sure that we're able to talk to people that we see in clinics. And be able to kind of give the news properly to people, because
That's important.
you do see people that unfortunately have had like premature ovarian insufficiency, or you've diagnosed, there's lots of different things that you could diagnose with these tests, and if you've just got it at home, like, it's just I think it's like scandalous to just give out a result with no follow-up whatsoever.
It's in everything though, like it's a lot of controversial things and like things that might cause you to feel upset or distressed. It's good to have someone to explain to you what's actually going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Like what
And
your
you don't
options
get that.
are.
And especially with, I have a lot of friends who have like messaged me over the years who've paid to get a random AMH test done.
Which
So
I assume
AMH,
which Nick will
not
explain.
Yeah.
No, I don't think so. No,
They're really
a few hundred
expensive. So AMH is your anti-Müllerian hormone and gives us, it tells us about your ovarian reserve. But, and it's supposedly like a constant test so that we can kind of tell where you are, and we can give you a bit of help. If you were having IVF, then it
It helps
for
predict
me,
response to IVF.
it would help me
me.
decide what drug dose you were on.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's what
Kind
an
of a
AMH
medical thing, isn't
uses.
it?
But there's a cut-off, so if you have a very low AMH, then you wouldn't qualify for NHS-funded treatment. So that's what the AMH is for, anti-Müllerian hormone, ovarian reserve. But the ovarian reserve, AMH, doesn't correlate with natural pregnancy. So in a natural pregnancy, all you need to do is ovulate one egg and then potentially get pregnant.
At the right time.
Yeah, at the right time. After you've done your LH test.
Which we've discussed,
Have
you do need to have
sex, all this kind of thing. You've tracked it. But when we're doing IVF, we want you to have loads and loads of eggs so that we can collect them, because there's a massive there's a massive drop off at every stage of the process. So we need to collect lots so that you can have a drop off at fertilization, a drop off at day 3, a drop off at day 5, and then you might get a couple of embryos at the end. So if you've got a low AMH, then you're never going to get loads of eggs. So it helps us with regards to IVF. But it doesn't.
No.
There are multiple papers that quite clearly say it does not correlate for you to get pregnant naturally.
Yeah. Which is bad, because that's how, you know, the Instagram adverts are always like,
Catchy.
oh, are you aged 35 to 40? Do you want to... Are you thinking about getting pregnant?
You've seen a lot of these.
Yeah, a lot of these.
Coming from experience.
And then it'll say, you know, here's a simple test you can do that will help you understand your fertility. And it's absolute crap.
Yeah,
It
like-
will
doesn't
not
help you
tell
understand.
you whether or not
Yeah.
you will get pregnant
No.
naturally or not. And you may or may not ever actually need IVF. So it's a real con, I think.
I
and
think
it's quite dangerous.
it's a really difficult one. And also, if you're on, because it's kind of also a constant and unchangeable, but it isn't. So some people that are on like a combined pill and they have their AMH checked, their AMH will be much lower than if they came off the pill for 6 months and had their AMH done again. Then their AMH would be higher, because it can be subdued by like exogenous
contraceptives
contraceptive pill.
Yeah.
So you're just kind of like, guys, like it's definitely not a good idea.
No.
No. And I think you have to be wary of like how much money you're paying for these things as well. You know, if something feels a bit dodgy, if you're if you're rushing into it out of a little bit of desperation, then it's probably a bad idea. Whereas, you know, if you can spend a bit more time thinking about it, maybe talking to people, talk to your GP, that's probably a bit more helpful.
Yeah.
There's also
before you do
some
that.
tests out there for men as well, isn't there, to see like test their sperm count and their sperm quality.
Yeah. And you can do, there's a lot of clinics that you can do a proper sperm analysis, just as you would have done at any hospital. But again, my massive issue with this is, so there's a problem. What are you going to do?
Know what? Yeah.
Because you've got no follow-up.
You've just
you've
got
told
told
me.
the problem.
Yeah.
Not told
So
anything
you've
to
got
do.
no sperm.
Yeah.
Know what?
Now what? Like, imagine just getting that result.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not. I think
And
people.
There's just no context.
I think
to
as
it,
well
is
the
there? You
advice
need-
that's out there is not always correct.
Yeah.
I've seen advice on social media that people are like, oh, if you save up your sperm, if the man doesn't ejaculate for a certain amount of time, he'll save more sperm up, he'll have more sperm, more likely to get pregnant.
Not a thing.
Not true.
No, total myth.
Not
true.
Yeah.
Actually, almost the opposite, is it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you kind of like the sperm then is just sat, like cooking in a sense and getting worse quality. So we like you to kind of like to get pregnant. It's better to kind of ejaculate more to get rid of kind of sperm that's sat around.
So it's not about
and
really
have
about
like,
the amount, it's the
no.
quality.
You
And
just
there's
want
lots-
like fresher.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, even with like
Fresh sperm delivery.
the temperature and
Yes.
temperature denaturing, there's things out there like laptop covers that men can use to
Yeah,
stop their
and-
laps getting warm.
Yeah, I kind of think that these have probably not a massive role, but do have some role, because there is lots of evidence that's saying that you should try not to cook your testicles.
That's the whole point. They're on the outside because they're meant to be cooler than the rest of your
Yeah.
body. So
So-
it makes sense that anything that would warm them up would be bad
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah,
But
and
you
laptops do get
still need to
really
wear
hot.
clothes.
Yeah.
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 I guess
Fire
you also don't
hazard.
need to ice them.
Yeah,
No, that's also probably
Don't go
not
too
a good
far.
idea.
definitely.
But that just,
don't
I
go
guess
too
that
far.
makes sense, you know, not
Something to be
overheating.
aware of if
Yeah.
you're trying to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Maybe not loads of hot baths and
Yeah, definitely. The other tests that people do at home are your hormone tests. So we talked about estrogen and progesterone, and we talked about that spike in LH that we know causes the ovulation. But you can have your LH and FSH, so your luteinizing hormone and your follicle stimulating hormone, checked at home. These are all big words and they don't mean
big
anything.
Words that you heard of in science class.
Yeah.
Not much further.
They don't mean anything. They're just part of the access, so they're part of that chain that leads to ovulation and leads to a potential pregnancy. But you have these checked sometimes as part of like not a private workup, because private clinics can be amazing and follow you up and sort out lots of different things. I'm not saying anything about that. I'm talking about these where you get a test done but you've got no follow-up, you've just got your
like
results
the third male test.
So LH and FSH changes throughout the month, so you have to have it done very specifically at a certain time of your cycle. And I just think like even knowing that is kind of just a massive red flag about getting tests done when you're not doing it through somebody who knows how they're going to give you the results. And GPs can do these. Like, I don't think everybody needs their fertility check-in, and I don't think everyone needs to see their GP about the fertility. But I'm saying if you are worried and if you have concerns, these are very basic tests that you could have a frank and open conversation with somebody who is aware of them and could advise you about them, rather than going down the line of, oh, I don't know, I'll just chuck £500 at the situation and get a test, which then you'll be like, oh my gosh, ringing Alison.
This is exactly what's happened. No, it's true,
Which
I don't
is
know whether
why
as
we're
well.
doing this podcast.
Exactly.
So now when my friends ask me about fertility, I'll just
say,
send them the link.
because it is something that happens more and more, I think, as you get older. Obviously, people start having babies as they get later through life, like late 20s, 30s, 40s, hopefully. So you do get asked a bit more and you become more aware of it as you get older. But the sources of information are still the same, so it's still kind of difficult sometimes to access the right info.
Yeah, and I do think that social media sometimes can really throw things off. Like, even if you see something that looks like it's professional or posted by a doctor, like I saw something and it was someone in a medical uniform, looked like a doctor, and they were saying the one way you need to get pregnant is you put 3 fingers below your belly button and you've got to massage it 2 times a day for this amount of time and then you will get pregnant. But like, where has this come from? But it looks like a doctor.
And also, what are you massaging?
Just your like intestines,
lower belly.
I mean, you just
might be good for digestion. But a lot of people will see this and think, oh, uniform, this is true.
This must be it.
I've got to go along with that. Other things about the position as well. There's been things you can only get pregnant in one position. Like, this position is the one that's going to get you pregnant.
Not true.
Not true. There's many different positions you can get pregnant in.
Any position where you're having penetrative intercourse.
Oh yes, this is true. Vaginal.
Into your vagina.
Let's get specific.
Into your vagina.
But no, there's lots of things like that. So that's, I mean, obviously you will not get pregnant, but by just doing this.
She didn't even say on the thing that you
pregnant.
needed to have intercourse. She said, just do this twice a day, you'll get pregnant.
That puts a bit, maybe that's,
this is how babies are made.
But a lot of people, it's like coming back to that thing, if you have been trying or you're very anxious about it, you see that, you think it looks like a legit thing, and then you might actually start to buy into it. You might spend your money on things like
tummy massager.
Like I've seen loads of Instagram adverts for fertility teas, which, I have a medical degree and I work in obstetrics, and I was like, there's no way there's any evidence behind this. But when I click on the page and I go to the website, it looks so legit. It really looks like they actually know what they're talking about, but you just can't find any evidence to support it. But not many people would bother actually finding that out. You would just buy it.
Something that's quite up and about in social media at the minute is a herb called ashwagandha, which I don't know much about this, haven't really read into it, but a lot of people say they're like, it really promotes female fertility, but it's also used for like
loads of other things.
It's meant to lower cortisol, basically. So I think the theory behind that is that if you have there's lots of information about having high cortisol, aka being stressed, affecting fertility, and there's like conflicting. Then ashwagandha is like a supplement that can reduce your cortisol levels, but I don't know if that's actually been.
I mean, it's not like a
trial.
female only herb. Lots of people use it. But again, I've not read into this.
But I think the thing here is that there's a lot of information online that isn't backed up by science, that is being spread, and you're targeting women aged 25 to 40, and a lot of people are probably spending money on things that they think will work, but really will not.
Yeah,
And it's just a really sad
Yeah.
like state of affairs, really.
It is. It's a lot of money that's like just
Yeah.
wasted that you could spend on other things like
Holidays.
I'm going to say
holidays
have
to
a holiday.
relax, to get
And also
pregnant.
lower your
Yeah.
cortisol.
Yeah.
I think that's a beneficial way to
Just
spend
book a
your money.
holiday.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. The other one that we did have a little chat about is whether you need to stay laying down Kim Kardashian
Yeah.
Your legs in the air, ladies.
So
I
yeah,
mean, and you don't.
No. No.
that is definitely not
But
true.
there
You
is
do
a
not
lot,
need
and
to
it's
do
in
that.
like TV shows, in Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yeah, you
you
were
have to
saying.
lay on your back to make sure that you get pregnant.
So there's actually a study that, well, there's more than one study, but there are studies that have been done after people have had IUI, so intrauterine insemination. So you've come through and you've had basically sperm put in the right place at the right time. And in one of the studies, more people got pregnant if they got up and off the bed than the people that laid on the bed for 15 minutes. So I
Which
think we
could be
can
just
quite
complete.
Yeah, but I think we can quite clearly say that
It's
you
not
don't
gonna
need to
make
stay
it
out the bed.
Yeah.
No.
And also remember, like, it is only one sperm at the end of the day that needs
Yeah.
to get to that egg. So it
There's
doesn't matter if
millions.
most of the semen
If it-
comes out.
if
It's
someone
the one that
doesn't
needs to get to
Yeah.
the right place.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think people do get worried about that though, because they're like, oh, it's all come back out. And you're like,
Yeah.
no, it's not all come back out. It's not just like sperms that are in that. There's lots of other...
Yeah, there's like, they're tiny and there's millions of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing I see on my Instagram all the time is these like self-insemination devices. I don't actually know what they're called, but just
Turkey
say it's
baster.
like a turkey baster, but they're a little bit more like advanced. But I
Meant
think
to
this
look
is
more
like aimed at
scientific.
people who are worried about losing semen. So it'll like put your partner's semen in this little cup and then you put that in your vagina and it stays there for longer. So it's feeding into that. You need to lie down after you have sex, or you
Yeah.
need to have the semen in your vagina for
Yeah.
longer, which is not true.
Yeah, not true.
But it's just so weird.
Lots
Why are
of
you
myths
buying
out there.
these things?
And
Like,
lots
just
of
have sex.
questions as well. We did get some questions from social media.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
I think we have answered some of them.
Have we?
Yeah, let's see what we've not answered. Someone's asked how likely it is to get pregnant without a condom.
I mean,
Yeah.
very likely. Well, I say very likely, but actually...
I think
If
it's
it's at the right
from
time and
someone who's
everything.
not wanting to
Yeah.
get pregnant.
Yeah, so it depends where you are in your cycle, as we said. I would, if you don't want to get pregnant, then use contraception because you can't be using anything else as a form of contraception. Like contraception needs to be used.
Yeah.
Yeah, like condoms or hormone treatments.
Yeah,
whatever you
Yeah.
can.
anything that you choose, but you need to be using contraception. But there is about a 20% chance each month, if you're somebody who is fertile, that you would get pregnant.
If you have sex.
In the right
on the
time.
right
At the right time, around
Yeah.
ovulation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not as high probably as, especially when like, I don't know, TV programs or
Yeah.
like, it's always like really young girls, isn't it, that randomly
Yeah.
get pregnant the first time they have sex, and
Yeah.
they are more fertile. People are more fertile when you're younger, but still, it's still not that high a chance that
Yeah.
you will get pregnant.
Another
Um,
question we had, which I think, in context, they've asked if you're taking your birth control pills and you miss one, can you get pregnant? But I think that's maybe like, if you miss one, are you going to get pregnant?
Well, that kind of depends what pill you're on. So
Okay.
most of the pills have a sort of 12 to 24-hour window. It depends which
Okay.
pill. Back in the day, a lot of the pills were a bit rubbish and you only had a 3-hour window. So if you missed your
Wow.
pill, you had to, really quickly remember to take it. Otherwise, you were at risk of getting pregnant if you had sex. Whereas now that window is much bigger. So check which pill you're on because you might actually have a whole day. And I think a lot of the
And
time
it
you can
depends
just
where
take...
you are in your cycle, and it
Yeah.
depends how long
It
you've been
does.
on that pill as well.
Yeah.
If you've been on the pill a long time and your ovulation is suppressed, so you're not ovulatory, so you're not releasing that egg every month, then you're not going to get
chances
pregnant.
are
if
slim.
you
It's
miss it.
definitely
Yeah.
very personal because there'll be some people that miss a few pills, get pregnant,
Yeah.
but they've been on the same pill for ages. But there'll be some people that stop taking the pill, are
And
trying
then
to get pregnant,
Yeah.
and still are struggling
Yeah.
for quite a while afterwards.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pills, though, are very individual as to what you can and can't do with how many you can miss. It really
Yeah,
does
you just
depend
need to check which pill
where
you're
you
on,
are
basically.
in your cycle.
But you can get pregnant if you miss
Yeah.
a pill. If it's
Yeah.
been a long enough time
Yeah.
that it's not working for you anymore, then yes, you
Yeah.
can. But it's unlikely if you've taken it regularly for the rest of the cycle.
Yes.
Yeah, and obviously we discussed that taking contraception doesn't affect your future fertility. But someone has asked, is there any contraception that can improve future fertility?
No.
No.
Short answer, no.
No.
Yeah. I think being the best version of yourself improves your fertility, as we said before, making sure that you're getting plenty of sleep, good food to eat, not too much alcohol, not smoking, that your weight is steady, and that it's within a normal BMI range. Those are the things that are really going to be best for you, and not just best for you to get pregnant, but best for you throughout pregnancy. Like, being pregnant is a massive strain on your body, and so like being the best person you can be from a health point of view before you get pregnant means that you've got less chance of getting gestational diabetes, less chance of going into preterm labour, less chance of... There's loads of good things about why it's best to be as healthy as you can be before you get pregnant.
But also I think important to think as well that if someone is infertile, it's not always because they're unhealthy and they've done these bad things.
Oh gosh,
no,
definitely not. Definitely not.
But yeah, no contraception will improve your fertility. Hopefully it will work and prevent you getting pregnant while you use it. But it will improve your fertility.
That's what we want.
I just thought, I wonder if that question is more like, you know how certain things like the coil will mean that you don't ovulate?
Yeah.
If I'm not ovulating, say from age 18 to 24, will I then get those 6 years?
No. So you
when I'm
still
40.
lose your
Still
eggs
lose
at the
them.
same rate regardless.
Okay.
So you're born with more eggs than you will ever ovulate. And like from the moment you're born, you're losing eggs. So they go under a process called atresia.
Yeah.
So that was extremely professional.
I like that.
They'll be lost every month regardless of whether you're ovulating. You'll only ever actually release a teeny tiny fraction of the eggs that you're like actually born with. So no.
Yeah, I just wondered if
you'll
that
have
was
more
where
eggs.
we're coming from.
I've banked those 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to save it all maybe when I'm 50.
Women
Retired.
can't save eggs and men should not save their sperm.
No,
that's the moral
no
of the
saving. No saving.
Use it while it's fresh.
And save your money and book a holiday.
I like that.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've covered how to get pregnant.
Yeah.
I think so. The ins and outs.
So proud.
I like it. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Lovely, well done. Thank you for all.
So, quick disclaimer, all opinions and views expressed in the podcast are our own and are not affiliated with where we work. And information given shouldn't be taken as medical advice.
And you can follow us on Instagram at Between Two Ovaries.
And please follow us on wherever you are listening to our podcast.
Thank you.